Everyone in Maple Ridge said it was the quiet kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. But that night, the silence was broken by red and blue lights flashing against my living room walls. One minute, I was halfway through a documentary about deep-sea fish. The next, my street looked like the 4th of July parade had rolled in early. I muted the television. Outside, 2 dark sedans and a police cruiser sat crooked across the curb. Their lights spun without sirens, casting uneasy shadows over the manicured lawns. This was Maple Ridge. We didn't do flashing lights. Our biggest drama was usually Karen Brownlee, the HOA president, sending someone a violation notice because their trash bin was out 20 minutes too long. So when I opened the door and found a man in a tailored suit standing on my porch, I knew my night wasn't about to end quietly. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp in the way that makes you feel like you've already confessed to something you didn't do. "Thomas Miller?" he asked. "That's me," I said, leaning on the frame. "Bit of a light show for a Tuesday night. Did someone's garden gnome go missing again?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he flashed a leather badge. The gold caught the strobing lights. "Agent Ramirez, FBI. This is Agent Clark, IRS Criminal Investigations." My stomach did a slow flip. FBI, IRS. That wasn't a combination you wanted to see parked in front of your hydrangeas. For a man whose biggest thrill was watching his petunias bloom on schedule, this was the kind of visit that made your blood run cold. Ramirez's voice was steady, low. "We're conducting an investigation into financial irregularities concerning your homeowners association." Of course, Karen Brownlee, I should have known. I almost laughed. "Let me guess, this involves our fearless leader and her obsession with rules." His expression didn't change much, but I thought I caught the ghost of a smile. "Our investigation is ongoing. What we need, Mr. Miller, is a small favor. Your house has a clean line of sight to the community clubhouse and the HOA president's residence. We'd like to position a surveillance van in your driveway, discreet, nothing flashy." A van in my driveway, watching Karen. I could almost taste the poetic justice. For years, she had ruled this neighborhood like a petty queen, fining people for wind chimes, lecturing them about mailbox colors, and turning neighbors against each other. Now the federal government wanted to set up shop right under her nose. I didn't hesitate. "All right, but if my petunias get trampled, I'm billing the United States Treasury." That earned a real smile from Agent Clark, the younger one. He gestured to a beat-up white van idling down the block. It read Pipe Dreams Plumbing in peeling blue letters. The perfect disguise. They backed it into my driveway, blending into the night as if it belonged there all along. The sedans pulled away. The cruiser followed. Within minutes, Maple Ridge looked normal again, but I knew better. Something far bigger was unfolding, something that made Karen's usual pettiness look like child's play. I went back inside, but the deep-sea fish on my TV no longer mattered. My neighborhood had its own predators. The next morning, the storm arrived. I was watering the flowers when I heard the shrill whine of an electric golf cart tearing down the street. Karen Brownlee herself screeched to a halt at my curb. She was already pointing before she'd even stopped. Her manicured finger shook with fury as she aimed at a black Jeep parked across the street. "That's it," she shrieked, her voice slicing the morning air. "That's your vehicle, the one you've been using for your secret meetings." I blinked, the watering can dripping at my side. "Karen, I drive a sensible sedan, gets good gas mileage. That thing looks like it eats smaller cars for breakfast. It's not mine." "Don't lie to me, Thomas. I have it on good authority. You're plotting something. Secret gatherings, schemes, plans to disrupt the harmony of Maple Ridge." Her paranoia was almost impressive. I kept my voice calm, steady. The tone I knew drove her absolutely insane. "Karen, the only thing I'm plotting is what to have for lunch. Maybe a sandwich. And if there's any harmony here, it's the sound of everyone gritting their teeth whenever you send out another fine." Her face went purple, an eggplant shade of rage. She was winding up for another explosion when the van door slid open. Agent Ramirez stepped out. His dark suit was absurdly out of place in the sunlight, but his presence carried weight. He didn't even look at me. He looked directly at Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but edged with authority. "Is there a problem here?" For the first time since I'd known her, Karen was struck silent. She darted glances between him, the van, and me, trying to stitch together the story in her head. And then I saw it, the flicker in her eyes, the calculation. She wasn't just suspicious anymore. She was furious. To her, I had committed treason, brought outsiders into her kingdom. In her mind, I had broken the unspoken pact of fear she used to control everyone else. And queens don't forgive traitors. Karen spun her cart around and sped away, tires screeching. But before she left, she gave me a look, a glare so sharp it felt like it could cut through bone. A promise. She was going to burn me to the ground. What she didn't know was that I wasn't standing alone. I had the fire department sitting quietly in my driveway. And that black Jeep she thought was mine, it was watching her every move. Everyone thought Karen ruled Maple Ridge because of her clipboard and her fines. But the truth was she ruled by fear. And now that fear had a new focus, me. I felt it the very next day. Whispers on the sidewalk, neighbors giving me cautious looks like I'd suddenly grown horns. Karen hadn't wasted a minute spinning her tale. And then it landed. I woke to the sound of paper sliding under my front door. It was a printout, an email, supposedly from me. The subject line read, "A concerned homeowner." The body of the email praised a landscaping company I'd never heard of, Supreme Scapes, and insisted the HOA should hire them immediately, even though their quote was astronomical. It reeked of fraud, and it was signed in my name. I carried it next door to Ravi, my neighbor. He was a wiry guy with thick glasses and a house full of gadgets, cameras, drones, smart locks. The kind of man who could probably hack into NASA with his toaster if he got bored. He studied the email header on his screen. "This isn't you, Tom, you're blunt. This is slimy. And look here, the IP trace is routed through the clubhouse Wi-Fi. She's sloppy, but she's careful enough to hide behind the HOA's own network." My jaw tightened. Karen had written it, I knew it, but proving it was the trick. I called Agent Clark. He practically sounded excited. "She's moving faster than we thought. Good, keep everything, every fake email, every forgery. She thinks she's clever, but she's leaving a trail." That night, I sat on my porch staring at the plumber's van humming quietly in my driveway. Inside, federal agents sifted through signals and watched Karen's every move. I was supposed to feel safe. Instead, I felt like I was living in a movie I hadn't agreed to star in. And then it escalated. 3 days later, Ravi called me at midnight. His voice was tight. "Tom, you need to see this." We sat side by side in the glow of his computer. His doorbell camera footage played in grainy night vision. A figure in dark clothing, hoodie pulled tight, crept up my driveway. They moved like they belonged there, hugging the shadows. My pulse quickened as I leaned closer. The intruder slipped into my side garage door, one I foolishly left unlocked, and placed a white envelope into my old toolbox. 10 seconds, in and out. Ravi slowed the clip. "We can't see the face, but wait." He zoomed in. The sleeve rode up. For a split second, a bracelet glimmered in the infrared light, thick, gaudy, unmistakable. I knew it instantly. I'd seen it at the Maple Ridge picnic on Karen's wrist. A gold-plated charm shaped like a gavel. My throat went dry. She'd come onto my property. She'd planted evidence. The next morning, I called Agent Clark. His voice sharpened the second I told him. "Don't touch it. Don't go near the toolbox. She put it there to trigger something. Let her spring her own trap. We'll be ready." But Karen didn't go to the police. She went for something bolder. That afternoon, a message appeared on the HOA's community forum. It was from her, dripping with false concern. "Dear neighbors," she wrote, "there have been troubling rumors of misconduct and theft. For the safety of our community, I'm calling an emergency neighborhood watch meeting in front of Mr. Miller's house." I read it twice. She was staging a public humiliation. She wanted the whole neighborhood gathered while she discovered stolen money in my garage. She wanted me ruined. And I realized, standing at my window, that this wasn't just about fines or rules anymore. This was war. The agents told me to stay calm, stay inside. "We'll be there," Ramirez said. So I sat by my window as the crowd gathered on my lawn. Neighbors I'd known for years, some whispering, some pointing. Buddy Bruno, the loudmouth from 2 streets over, wore a t-shirt that read, "I'm with the guy they're framing." His defiance was the only bright spot. Then Karen appeared, standing tall in the street like a general before battle. She spoke of values and threats to our way of life, casting glances at my house with every line. She was setting the stage, and right on cue, my phone rang. "Sir, this is the police dispatcher. We received a call about a man at your address, waving a firearm, acting erratically." The world froze. She hadn't just forged emails. She hadn't just planted evidence. She made a false police report designed to get me shot. I looked down. In my hand was a coffee mug, not a gun. My voice stayed calm, but inside every nerve was on fire. Dispatcher, I'm unarmed. I'm in my living room. This is a false report. Outside, 2 police cruisers screeched up, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, hands hovering over their weapons. And across the street, Karen smiled. She thought she had me cornered. She thought the next few minutes would destroy me. But she didn't know the one thing that would save me, that I'd prepared my house better than she prepared her lies. The knock on my door wasn't polite. It rattled the hinges. Sir, come out with your hands visible. I swallowed hard, set down my coffee mug, and raised my empty hands. Through the blinds, I saw 2 officers standing on my lawn, tense, scanning every shadow. Their cruiser lights pulsed across the crowd of neighbors. I opened the door slowly. Officers, my name is Thomas Miller. I'm the homeowner. I'm unarmed. There is no gun here. Karen gasped theatrically from the crowd. Don't believe him. He could have hidden it. Her voice dripped with the satisfaction of someone who thought she was seconds away from victory. But the sergeant leading the call-out was older, seasoned. His mustache twitched as he studied me, studied her, studied the scene. He didn't move like a rookie. He moved like a man who could smell a setup from a mile away. Mr. Miller, he asked evenly, what were you doing just before we arrived? Raking leaves in my backyard. I have a doorbell camera. It'll show me coming back inside. I can pull it up right now. He nodded. I held out my phone, hands still visible, and played the clip. The video showed me with nothing but a garden rake, time-stamped minutes before the 911 call. The sergeant turned the phone back to me, his jaw set. Then he raised his voice so the crowd could hear. This was a false report. The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Karen's face drained white. She tried to recover. I was just relaying a concern from a confidential source. Ma'am, the sergeant cut in, his tone sharp. Filing a false police report is a crime. We'll be following up. He didn't wait for her excuses. He motioned to his partner, and the 2 of them holstered their weapons, got back in the cruiser, and drove off. The show was over. But the whispers had already begun. The crowd dispersed in uneasy silence, glancing at Karen like maybe, just maybe, the Queen of Maple Ridge wasn't as untouchable as she thought. I closed my door, adrenaline still coursing. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something colder. If Karen was willing to risk calling the police with lies that could have gotten me killed, there was no telling how far she'd go next. That night, Ravi came running to my porch, clutching his tablet. His eyes were wide. Tom, you need to see this. You're not going to believe it. He showed me grainy thermal footage from one of his drones. 2 figures stood by the community pool after midnight. One short and stocky, Stan Gable, Karen's treasurer. The other taller, broader, one of the landscaping contractors. Ravi zoomed in. The smaller figure passed an envelope. The taller one opened it, counted stacks of cash, and handed back another envelope. A quiet cash drop under the stars. My jaw clenched. She's not just petty, she's running a racket. We sent the footage to Agent Clark. His voice crackled over the secure line, buzzing with excitement. That's the nail, Miller. We've got the motive: kickbacks, fraud, money laundering, and the false report. That's the cover-up. We're building an airtight case. But Karen wasn't slowing down. She doubled her efforts, convinced she could still bury me before the truth buried her. 2 days later, the neighborhood felt different, tense, on edge. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. That evening, I drafted a message on the HOA forum. My hands didn't shake as I typed, though my heart pounded. Pursuant to Article 7, Section 3 of the Maple Ridge HOA bylaws, I, Thomas Miller, move for a full independent forensic audit of all association financial accounts, contracts, and expenditures for the preceding 36 months. I kept the language professional, calm, no emotion, just facts. And then I hit post. The response was immediate. My phone buzzed with texts. Neighbors who'd never dared speak up before were suddenly emboldened. Finally, one wrote, "About time someone stood up," said another. Buddy Bruno sent me a picture of a flaming sword. For the first time, the tide was shifting. People weren't whispering about me anymore. They were whispering about her. And that's when the lights went out. At first, I thought it was a fluke, but then I stepped outside. My entire block was black, streetlights, porches, every home dark, but a block over, lights still glowed like nothing was wrong. This wasn't an accident, this was a message. My phone buzzed. Clark's text lit the screen. Power hub at the end of your street was hit. Only your section down, she's making a move. The hair on my neck prickled. Karen wasn't just fighting back with words or lies anymore. She was cutting power, turning out the lights like she could snuff me out of Maple Ridge altogether. But she made one mistake. She forgot I'd spent my entire career analyzing broken systems. And hers, it was showing cracks everywhere. I gripped the heavy Maglite flashlight from my kitchen drawer, switched it on, and let its beam cut through the darkness. She wanted me afraid of the dark. But she had no idea this was my street, and I knew every shadow better than she did. Darkness changes everything. A street you've walked 1,000 times becomes foreign. Familiar shapes twist into shadows that feel alive, and that night Maple Ridge was swallowed whole. I stood in my living room, Maglite in hand, phone buzzing with Ravi's voice in my ear. His drone was still circling above on its independent battery. "Tom, I've got movement. One heat signature heading away from the power hub, fast, toward the back service gate." Stan Gable, it had to be. Karen didn't get her manicured hands dirty. She had lapdogs for that. I slipped out my back door. The grass was cool under my shoes as I cut across yards, moving silent, every step measured. My neighborhood, my terrain, I knew every hedge, every dip in the lawns. 50 yards ahead, Ravi whispered. "He's fumbling with something, keys maybe. Wait, Tom, there's a golf cart in the shadows by the gate. That's his getaway." A golf cart? That was Karen's idea of an escape plan. It would have been comical if it wasn't so dangerous. I moved faster, heart pounding. Ahead, I caught a glimpse of Stan's panicked silhouette against the faint glow of the city lights. He was wheezing, his dress shoes clumsy on the asphalt. He reached the cart, yanked the keys, and jammed them in the ignition. The quiet electric whine sputtered to life. But panic makes people stupid. The service gate was narrow, one side a brick pillar, the other a hedge. He floored it, overcorrected, and the cart tipped. For one breathless second it balanced on two wheels, then crashed sideways into the bushes. The sound was ugly, metal grinding, branches snapping. Stan tumbled out, rolling onto the grass. For a moment he just lay there groaning, then scrambled up, limping. He didn't even look around. He just bolted through a gap in the hedge, vanishing onto the main road. I stayed hidden, my beam stayed off, my breath steady, and then I saw it glinting on the pavement next to the wreck. A cell phone. I crouched, picked it up. The screen was still lit. No password. Stan really wasn't built for this. And there, right in front of me, was a text message. From Karen. It read, "Did you handle it? Meeting moved to tonight. Emergency. Clubhouse in 1 hour." My blood turned cold, then hot. She wasn't just improvising. She was accelerating. She knew the audit was coming, and she was desperate to crush me before I could speak. I called Ramirez and Clark. My voice was low, urgent. "She's holding an emergency meeting tonight. I've got her message straight from Stan's phone." Clark didn't hesitate. "Good, let her. This is it. She's pulling everyone into one room. We'll be there. You act normal, Miller. Make your motion. Let her unravel herself." So an hour later, I walked into the clubhouse. The place was packed. Every homeowner in Maple Ridge seemed to be there, the air charged with whispers and unease. Karen stood at the podium, her beige suit crisp, her smile tight, her eyes fever-bright. She gripped the microphone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She launched into her speech, dripping with venom wrapped in fake concern. She spoke about serious threats to our community and individuals working against harmony. She never said my name, but her gaze burned holes through me with every word. And then she played her hand. "Given these unprecedented circumstances," she said, her voice trembling but loud, "the board has already voted to remove a member from this association for conduct detrimental to our values." That was it, the ambush. She was going to expel me right there. But I stood before she could finish. My voice rang clear. "Point of order, Madame President." The room hushed. She froze, eyes narrowing. "According to the bylaws you wrote, a vote to remove a member requires 10 days written notice. This meeting is invalid, and emergency meetings may only be called for acts of God or threats to physical property. You are in violation of your own rules." A ripple ran through the crowd. Neighbors pulled out their phones, scrolling through the bylaws. They found the same words I'd memorized. Karen's face went pale. Then perhaps, I continued, calm as ever, we should turn to the most pressing concern, our finances. I move for a full independent forensic audit of the last 3 years of HOA spending. For a beat silence, then a voice shouted, "Second." Another joined, "Show us the books." Applause broke out. The support was overwhelming. Karen's grip on the microphone slipped. Her eyes darted to Stan's empty chair. She was alone, and she knew it. But desperation makes people dangerous. That was when the side door burst open. Stan stumbled in, suit torn, face slick with sweat, and in his trembling hand, a gun. Screams tore through the clubhouse as neighbors dove for cover. Chairs clattered, voices shouted. And in that chaos I realized Karen's little kingdom was finally cracking apart. But no one knew yet whether it would crumble quietly or explode. The scream of metal chairs scraping across the clubhouse floor still rings in my ears. 1 second the room was buzzing with chants of "Show us the books." The next, Stan Gable was standing in the doorway, his face ashen, his hands shaking, and a silver pistol glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Everybody shut up," he cried, voice cracking like glass. His eyes darted everywhere, wild, panicked, cornered. The trembling barrel swept across the crowd. Mothers pulled children behind them. Men who'd spent their lives avoiding confrontation suddenly found themselves crouched on the floor, hearts pounding. Karen stood frozen at the podium, her lips parted, her eyes wide. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. She was just as terrified as the rest of us. I didn't move. My sister Lena's voice echoed in my mind. "Rattlesnakes look like sticks until they bite." Stan wasn't a killer. He was an accountant drowning in lies too deep for him to swim out of, but he was scared enough to make a mistake. He waved the gun toward the ceiling. I said, "Be quiet." And then, whether by accident or rage, he pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening. The bullet tore into the overhead light fixture. Glass and white dust rained down like confetti from a nightmare. Half the room was plunged into darkness, shadows stretching jagged across the walls. Gasps, sobs, silence. For a single suspended moment, no one dared breathe. Then everything moved at once. 2 neighbors I'd barely noticed before leapt into action. A woman in a jogging suit lunged from the back row, twisting Stan's wrist with practiced precision. At the same instant, a man in a polo shirt seized the pistol, ripping it from his grip. Stan collapsed onto the podium, crying, gasping, utterly broken. The crowd erupted, but not with panic this time, with shock. Because at the front of the room, a man I had noticed before finally rose from his seat. He flipped open a leather badge case, his voice cutting through the chaos. "FBI, nobody leaves this room. You're all witnesses at a federal crime scene." Agent Clark, the IRS tech nerd from my driveway days ago, he wasn't just some guy in a suit, he was the vanguard. Neighbors froze, wide-eyed. A few whispered, "I knew it." Others just slumped into chairs, hands trembling. Karen clutched the podium with white knuckles. You can't do this. I'm the president." Clark didn't even blink. "Ma'am, sit down." From the aisle, Buddy Bruno couldn't help himself. Stage whispering, he said, "Somebody grab her clipboard." Nervous laughter bubbled through the crowd, tension cracking just a little. Karen swayed like a queen stripped of her crown, scanning for an exit that wasn't there. For years, she'd commanded this room with rules and fines. Tonight, the rules were hers no longer. And that's when I saw it, her empire collapsing in real time. Stan, handcuffed and sobbing, being dragged toward the side door, neighbors whispering, so it was true, all of it. Karen's clipboard slipping from her hands, clattering to the floor like the gavel of a judge declaring her reign over. The clubhouse transformed from chaos into controlled order. More agents streamed in, plainclothes neighbors shedding their disguises. Witnesses were separated, statements taken, evidence logged. It was efficient, precise. And in the middle of it all, Karen stood trembling, her world unraveling, her power dissolving. But she wasn't finished, not yet. Because when the agents turned to escort Stan out, I noticed something chilling. One chair was still empty. "Karen." I blinked, scanned the room. She was gone. Ramirez, his cheek cut from falling glass, appeared at my side. "You okay, Miller?" I nodded, though my pulse still thundered. She slipped out. His face hardened. She won't get far. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the kind of tyrant to surrender quietly. She would fight until her last shred of control was ripped from her hands. And out there in the night, she was already planning her next move. The clubhouse emptied slowly, neighbors drifting back to their homes in stunned silence, still whispering about the gun, the agents, the collapse of the Queen's reign. But outside, Maple Ridge wasn't quiet. The dark sedans were back, the same ones that had painted my living room with flashing lights weeks ago. Only this time they weren't here for questions, they were here for the kill shot. I watched from the clubhouse steps as they fanned out like a silent army, gliding down our perfect cul-de-sac toward the Queen's castle, Karen Brownlee's pristine colonial. Agents in windbreakers marked FBI and IRSCI spilled from the vehicles. They didn't batter the door down. They didn't need to. One tool, one twist, and the lock popped. They flowed inside like water, vanishing into the dark house. For a neighborhood where the biggest excitement used to be a debate over mailbox paint, this was biblical. People stood in their driveways holding phones aloft, recording the raid, whispering like they were watching history unfold. And in a way, they were. Box after box came out of Karen's house. Laptops, hard drives, binders stuffed with receipts and contracts. The illusion of order she'd built for years was being gutted, dragged into the street under floodlights. Clark worked from a folding table set up right in her driveway, his fingers flying over a laptop, tech agents huddled around him. I gave my official statement inside the clubhouse, handed over every shred of evidence I'd gathered. The forged emails, Ravi's drone footage, the bracelet on the night vision camera. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened into something monstrous. Later, Clark waved me over. His eyes burned with triumph. On his screen was a web of accounts and shell companies, highlighted in bright lines. "You were right, Miller," he said, almost grinning. She was running everything through a ghost server. She thought she was clever, but she left the digital key on her personal laptop. We cracked it. And then I saw it, the scale. Every contract Maple Ridge signed, pool maintenance, lawn care, even street paving, padded by 30–40%. Kickbacks hidden inside fake invoices. Contractors handing her cash drops in the dark. The fake landscaping company, Maple Ridge Beautification LLC, a complete shell. It billed over $1 million in 5 years for work that was never done. She funneled it all offshore, Clark said, pointing to the spiderweb of accounts. We're talking millions. This wasn't just neighborhood bullying. This was organized fraud. I leaned against the folding table, the weight of it settling in. For years, we'd thought her fines, her pettiness were about control, but it wasn't just about power. It was about money, always money. Clark clicked through more files. And here's the kicker, the forged emails. We found them right here in her drafts folder, time-stamped. Written by her own hand, she framed you to cover her tracks. I clenched my fists. The audacity of it, the way she tried to bury me alive in her lies. But now the proof was undeniable. Still, one question gnawed at me. Where is she? Ramirez appeared at my shoulder, his face grim. Not here. She slipped out of the clubhouse during the chaos. Her car, gone. She's a runner. Before I could reply, Ramirez's phone buzzed. He listened, then snapped it shut. Local patrol spotted her Mercedes on the interstate. She refused to stop. I pictured it instantly. Karen, beige pantsuit still crisp, barreling down the highway, clutching the wheel with that same iron grip she used on her clipboard. The queen of rules, fleeing the law she used to wield like a sword. Ramirez's voice was steady. They'll box her in, rolling roadblock, this ends tonight. But even as he said it, I knew Karen wasn't going to surrender gracefully. She'd go down kicking, scratching, clinging to the last illusion of control. And standing in the glow of her driveway floodlights, I realized Maple Ridge wasn't just watching the fall of a tyrant. We were watching her final act. News travels fast in quiet neighborhoods. By the time the agents rolled their command station into Karen's driveway, half of Maple Ridge was standing outside in bathrobes and slippers, whispering to each other, phones glowing like fireflies. But when word spread that Karen was running, her silver Mercedes refusing to stop for police, everything changed. Someone dragged out a small TV, propped it on a folding chair. We crowded around as the local news cut to live helicopter footage. The aerial camera panned across the interstate, a long ribbon of headlights brought to a crawl by flashing blues and reds. At the very front, boxed in by patrol cars and the FBI's dark sedans, was her car, the silver Mercedes. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. For years, Karen had been larger than life in this neighborhood, more feared than loved, more dreaded than respected. And now she was just one more car caught in traffic, her reign measured in brake lights. The helicopter zoomed in, the driver's door cracked open, and there she was. Karen Brownlee, Queen of Maple Ridge, stepping onto the shoulder of the interstate in her beige pantsuit, her heels clicking against the asphalt. Her head was high, her chin tilted upward as if she could still command respect by sheer force of will. But the camera was merciless. It caught the tremor in her hands, the twitch of panic in her eyes. She tried to stare down the half-dozen officers closing in on her, tried to summon that same indignant power she'd used to terrify this neighborhood for years. But it was gone. The agent in the windbreaker said something to her, calm, steady, almost gentle. Then Karen's shoulders sagged. She turned, placed her hands behind her back, and the cuffs clicked shut. For a moment, the entire clubhouse parking lot back home was silent. Then a ripple ran through the crowd, a sound that grew and grew until it swelled into cheers. Not cruel cheers, not mocking, just pure relief. The spell had been broken. I sat back, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For weeks, I'd lived under her shadow, every move scrutinized, every word twisted. And now, the shadow was gone. The next day, the air in Maple Ridge felt different, lighter somehow. I walked through streets that didn't feel like prison corridors anymore. Neighbors who once avoided my eye now stopped to talk. Ravi stood on his lawn, drone buzzing lazily overhead, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Buddy Bruno drove past on his lawnmower, this time wearing a tricorn hat, saluting me like I was some general in a revolution. Even Lena called, her nurse's voice softened with relief. "I saw the news," she said. "It's over, Thomas, she didn't win." And she was right. But the FBI wasn't done. That afternoon, agents returned to pack up the last of their command post. Ramirez stopped by my porch, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "You held the line, Miller. You kept calm when most people would have cracked. That matters." Clark joined him, slapping me on the shoulder with a crooked grin. "You gave us the inside track. Months of work saved. You ever get bored in retirement, we could use a guy like you." I chuckled, shaking my head. "No thanks. I think I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime." But then I asked the question that had lingered since the very beginning. That black Jeep, the one Karen swore was mine, the reason she came after me in the first place, whose was it? Ramirez's mouth curled into the faintest smile. He gestured down the street where one last black Jeep sat idling, agents inside. "Ours, surveillance. We'd been watching her long before we knocked on your door. She saw it, let her guilty conscience fill in the blanks, and assumed you were her rival." I exhaled slowly, the irony hitting me like a wave. She had built her war against me on nothing but her own paranoia. She had written the script for her downfall herself. And all I had done was refuse to play the part she gave me. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge was free. But I had a sinking feeling that the fight wasn't entirely over. Karen was in custody, but the mess she'd left behind, the broken trust, the stolen money, the cracks in this community, was only just beginning to surface. The war was over, but the cleanup was only beginning. Within weeks, Maple Ridge looked nothing like the place it had been under Karen's reign. A judge dissolved the HOA entirely, calling it a textbook case of financial abuse and neighborhood tyranny. Her kingdom, her clipboard, her rules, her fines, vanished overnight. The numbers stunned us. Over $160,000 funneled through shell companies. Duplicate invoices, fake maintenance orders, contractors overcharging by 40% and slipping the excess back to Karen and Stan in cash. Maple Ridge Beautification, the landscaping company that never landscaped, turned out to be nothing more than a PO box and a scam account. It was all dragged into the light. Refund checks started arriving in our mailboxes, the stolen money clawed back dollar by dollar. Our HOA dues were slashed in half. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers, it was in the freedom. For years, Maple Ridge had been a neighborhood under glass. Too neat, too polished, too afraid. Karen patrolled like a warden, clipping the wings of anyone who dared step out of line, every flower bed inspected, every trash bin timed, every doormat scrutinized. And now, kids played street hockey again, their laughter echoing down the cul-de-sac like a song we'd forgotten. Ravi finally painted his garage door a shade of electric blue just to celebrate, daring anyone to complain. Buddy Bruno inflated a 10-foot flamingo on his front lawn, gaudy, ridiculous, glorious. Nobody fined him, nobody cared. The fear was gone. We threw a block party to mark the end of it all, the first real one in years. Ravi sent his drone into the air, snapping photos of neighbors gathered in the street grilling burgers, dancing to old songs, smiling like they'd been released from prison. Someone hung Christmas lights even though it was summer. Someone else set up a popcorn machine. For once, nobody worried whether Karen would roll by in her golf cart to issue citations. I stood among them, drink in hand, letting it all sink in. This wasn't just relief, it was rebirth. Later that night, I sat on my porch watching the last of the federal vans pull away. The plumber's truck was gone, the agents finished with their work. For the first time in months, my driveway was empty. My mailbox was too. No violation notices, no threats, just silence. Ramirez and Clark stopped by before they left, both looking bone-tired but satisfied. Ramirez gave me a firm handshake. "You didn't break, Miller, that mattered. You kept your head when it counted." Clark grinned, eyes twinkling with the kind of mischief that made him seem far younger than his suit. "Most people would have just moved away. You stood and fought. You didn't just save yourself, you saved this neighborhood." I didn't know what to say to that. All I could manage was, "It's my home. You don't run from a bully trying to take your home. You find their weak spot and push." They nodded, and with that, they were gone. A few days later, Karen's mugshot was plastered across the evening news. Beige suit traded for an orange jumpsuit, her expression a mask of shock that the world she'd built had collapsed. Stan had folded quickly, handing over every document, every secret. They'd both faced trial, fraud, conspiracy, false police report, evidence tampering, maybe even prison. But here in Maple Ridge, they were already finished. Their names became ghost stories, whispered only as reminders of what once was. Their power was gone, their kingdom shattered. I leaned back on my porch chair, letting the summer air wash over me. The lawn was overdue for mowing, the flower beds a little messy, and I didn't care. For the first time, I didn't expect a violation notice taped to my door about it. I thought about everything she'd tried, the forged emails, the planted evidence, the false 911 call. She had schemed and lied and weaponized a clipboard, trying to bury me under her empire of paranoia. But in the end, it wasn't me who fell, it was her. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, my oldest friend. "Victory ribs at my place this weekend. You're buying the beer." I chuckled. Across the street, Ravi waved from his driveway, holding up a paint roller still dripping bright blue. Buddy cruised past on his mower, Flamingo bobbing in the background, yelling, "Long live the revolution." And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it was true. Maple Ridge was ours again. The spell was broken. And freedom never looked so simple. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one.